big issues in freight to talk about with my guest today, Oren Zaslansky. He is founder and CEO of Flock Freight. Hi, Oren.
Hi there, thanks for having me today.
Thank you. I'm hoping you can contribute your expertise to three major issues to talk about today. The first is artificial intelligence, AI. How is it helping companies make their supply chains smarter and help them avoid future disruptions?
It starts with the intake of data. We live in a massive industry, $7 trillion globally, over $1 trillion here in the US, with a lot of disparate systems and different disparate data lakes. The being able to bring that data together so that it's can be contextualized for the first time, so that we can begin to apply modern machine learning and modern artificial intelligence, so that we can actually start to glean insights from it. There's a lot of noise in that data, but the emergence of the ability to really find that signal, to be able to make much more informed decisions, and even better yet, be able to predict where the changes in the supply chain are going, is something that is really just in the last few years beginning to emerge.
Yeah, you said emergence.
Yeah.
So it's a technology that has not fully reached its promise yet or potential, but it's still making a mark right now, even as we speak?
It is, and part of it is the tools that we use to mine that data and apply data science, but some of it too is the need for thickening data sets. Mm-hmm. So you may have the tools by which you can glean the insights that you need to make cutting edge decisions, but at the same time you have to accumulate enough data so that it's statistically relevant. Mm-hmm. So we're now really at the intersection of those two phenomena. We've got the tools, we have the ability to contextualize that data, but we also have a thick enough data set where we can really make heads or tails of it, and it's really beginning to drive and inform decision making, again, not just in terms of what we should do today, mm-hmm. but where we believe the markets are going in the future.
But you're actually comfortable using the term artificial intelligence to describe what's going on in that technology?
Absolutely, these models are learning. And it's interesting to say the least in the beginning when many of them are what we call non-expletive, so you don't actually always understand whereby the determination has come from. How did it arrive at that decision? Why is the machine making that choice?
The so-called black box.
Yeah.
That is an issue, right?
Yeah, and you deconstruct them as best you can. The reality is they're pulling in via neural networks massive amounts of data from all sorts of disparate sources, which is the very point. I don't believe it's likely, let alone reasonable, to be able to aggregate all that data or bring a single source of data. I think what's much more likely is to be able to pull that data in from all the places where it currently resides, contextualize it, and be able to make decisions from there.
Okay, thanks for that. I want to ask you now about this idea of what are some long-term infrastructure investments that can be made to expedite and encourage shared truck loading, which is necessary in a time of tight capacity, making things more efficient in general. What are some of those things that can be done?
Yeah, we do need to make the most of the existing assets that are out there. There's a phenomena, I think, uncovered, or made popular, I should say, by Airbnb, this idea of supplier surplus. There's excess inventory out there. Let's use it all the time. If I go on vacation for a week, we just assume put that asset to use in a low-cost way. The US supply chain, the global supply chain, I think has a very similar opportunity. We've got these trucks that are only half full, 3/4 full, rolling down the highway. They're burning the same amount of diesel fuel. So from a sustainability standpoint, it's a big opportunity. From a cost standpoint, if we could put more freight on board those trucks, there'd be economic opportunity for the carriers and lower cost for the shippers. And then maybe as importantly, we need to maximize the capacity that exists within the system right now. I don't know that we want to just keep adding more trucks into the system, more containers into the system, more trains into the system. I think certainly what we'd all agree that we'd want to do first is utilize every bit of capacity that's available. Sharing trucks amongst multiple clients is the fastest, best, highest impact way to create that outcome, and to do it now.
Even among nominal competitors maybe, but although not directly one-to-one, but maybe through a third party or something like that. Is that a potential step to take?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, a lot of shippers out there are not equipped to be able to aggregate across competitors, across other platforms, across other industries. By bringing third parties in whom are sort of neutral in their perspective, they can then begin to aggregate all of that empty space and all the shipping opportunity, again, not just across competitors, but across multiple industries.
Right.
You need to make sure those things are compatible. You wouldn't want to see something like hazardous materials in a trailer next to food. That wouldn't work. But at the same time, there are many compatible goods that can be put together with one another in a very agnostic way that creates value for everyone.
So I hear you saying that we can very broadly define the term infrastructure, not necessarily to mean more roads, more trucks, more bridges, but also software capabilities that do not involve huge investments in physical things, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We need to augment and supplement technology, software, cloud compute, cloud analytics, AI, machine learning environments. I mean, there's a lot of acronyms we could go on, but they're all various components of infrastructure. I think over the next decade or two, we will absolutely define infrastructure in the global supply chain very differently. I don't mean to suggest that things like trucks and trains and ships are no longer going to be part of that infrastructure, but they will be enabled and optimized using virtual components of infrastructure, software, cloud compute.
Right. Let's talk climate. Sustainability. The SEC has proposed climate disclosure rules out there. How do you see that as impacting the perception by the public and investors on transportation and freight?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Look, I think it's akin to walking into a restaurant now and seeing the calorie counts. We don't always like what we see, but as consumers, we're now enabled, we're empowered to make a better right choice for ourselves. So I don't pretend to believe that every consumer out there of transportation or supply chain services is going to be impacted by that information, but I believe many, many will. It can be incredibly eye-opening. I think the requirement to put that information out there will allow consumers, customers of all manner, to simply make it a more informed choice, knowing that there's a customer for every given thing out there that could possibly be sold. I think that once consumers begin to realize that the entire supply chain is, depending on where you look, number one or number two contributor to greenhouse gas in the world, we can begin to look at things like the previously discussed shared truckload and look at ways of taking existing infrastructure and making greater use of it, more efficiency. We don't want to send trucks, we don't want to send trains, we don't want to send ships out there that are only half full. It's incredibly wasteful.
Well, a lot of the data is out there already, but the question to which you can make use of it at this point, the question to which you can actually determine, like at a glance, a particular company or a particular retailer's carbon footprint, I think we're some ways away from that, are we not?
Yeah, I believe we are, but I think more so it's even unpacking how we get to these numbers. So wanting to understand that if a given retailer has a certain carbon score of X or Y, it's wanting to understand what really contributes to that. I believe that every firm can take measures internally to make themselves a more sustainable firm. You can look to increase recycling, you can look to reduce waste, literally within our own employee headcounts. The reality though is those are tragically small drivers from a sustainability standpoint. Rather, we need to consider being much more efficient and more optimal within the supply chain. We need to look at retailers and say, what is their commitment to carbon neutrality? How are they doing business? What are their business practices? Are they sending trucks half empty every time between the origin and the destination, or are they getting them full? Just doing that alone, which again reduces the cost for the shipper, increases the earnings for the carrier, will dramatically make significant improvements toward greater sustainability outcomes. And I applaud the retailer or other providers in the economy that can benefit from that they can fly that flag, have those scores out there via regulatory agencies like the SEC, end up in the hands of consumers to decide, I can now make an informed choice. I want to go to retailer A or I want to go to retailer B, and part of the reason or the decision making I'm going to make is their all-in belief in the quality of that product.
Those are three great critical issues to talk about. Thank you so much for that, Oren. But I want to give you the chance to just talk very briefly about Flock Freight, especially. What are you guys up to in the marketplace today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Flock Freight does algorithmic carpooling and the creation of shared truckloads. So we've got two missions. One is to make sure that all freight moves in a hubless fashion. So instead of freight pallets of manufactured goods moving on 7 trucks with 7 drivers through 7 terminals, very slowly with high damage rates and low quality, making its way from origin to destination, we build what we call shared truckloads, where we aggregate virtually all that customer freight and we put it into a shared environment, which is also, of course, much more sustainable and increases quality. Our other mission is making sure that the carriers on the trucking side are always full. We believe that about half of the entire full truckload industry, or $500 billion a year in the United States, the trucks are only half to 2/3 full. We want to fill them up.
Wow.
And by filling them up, we're allowing carriers for the first time to make more money, to have economic opportunity the likes of which they've never seen. I think during the pandemic in particular, early 2020 and through 2021, when we saw empty grocery store shelves, we realized for the first time what I think we've known, and that's that we're essential. The concept of essential service provider, I think, was understood by those of us that worked in the supply chain, maybe not by most consumers. We want to make sure that people can eat. We want to make sure that people have the goods that they depend on and have access to. The best way that we can accelerate that supply chain, that we can improve continuity, reduce friction, is to simply maximize the utilization of all the assets out there and make sure that the men and women driving trucks in this country have sufficient economic opportunity to want to come back and do it again.
Yeah, great approach. Thank you so much, Oren. Again, I really appreciate you speaking with me today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We speak with Oren Zaslansky of Flock Freight. Thank you very much for watching.